Hi, friends. Welcome to the social sector, the AI imperative, where we pick apart and demystify the potential of AI in the social sector. Hi, friends. In this episode of the AI imperative, we will be chatting with Matt McCormick, an MBA, PMP, and expert in advisory services at Grant Thornton. He has been weaving operations and strategy together for many years, and I look forward to sharing his expertise with you. Welcome to this episode of the AI Imperative. Today, we are chatting with Matt McCormick, advisory services expert at Grant Thornton, where he has been tying strategy and operational practices together for many years. And so Matt is here to help us understand what is digital transformation, how does it play out in our sector specifically, and what does it look like in other sectors, which what I understand, it's not that different. So Matt, if you want to add anything to your intro there, please do. But otherwise, we can dive right into the juicy content.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Rachel. It's good to always connect with you. I would echo, I've been working with nonprofits, higher education organizations for the last 10 years. And right now with Grant Thornton and their advisory practice. And so we do a lot of different types of projects, but digital transformation is definitely one of them. So eager to jump in and have some conversations about that.
And it's a big, dense word, digital transformation. What does that mean in the world of advisory services?
It's a big open-ended question there at the beginning. So I would say when you look at the word transformation, let's forget the word digital first. But the word transformation is to kind of really go from where you are today to where you want to go. And that's really a lot of what we do is we work with nonprofits and come in and say, okay, let's really understand where we are today and then understand where you want to go. And let's design a roadmap to help you do that. So that's kind of a transformation. Digital transformation obviously implies technology underneath of this, right? So if this was, I don't know, 60, 70, 100 years ago, transformation would not involve as much internet or technology computers that we have today. Today, it is essentially the fundamental thing. And I know we're going to talk about AI later, and people always think that, okay, we have to be on the latest bleeding edge of technology, whether it's AI or something, and that will help us, whatever our cause is in nonprofit space, be successful. That isn't always the case. You really have to think through kind of the people that you have on the bus and where that bus is driving, and then the processes that those people are using, and then technology supporting that. I think a lot of times when people do digital transformation, they'll maybe jump quickly to, oh, we need this new system and it's going to solve all our problems. Or if we somehow integrate Chat GPT into our work, everything's going to be better. Like, no, it'll probably make it worse. You got to make sure you pay attention to those other two things at the beginning. And so happy to jump more to that, or we can take it in
Yeah,
direction
no,
as
and I
well.
think
Yeah.
the making it worse piece is at the Microsoft Global Nonprofit Leader Summit at the end of January, early February. There was a panelist who said these words that just struck through the heart of me, that in order to incorporate AI, we first need to have secure and contiguous technology. It's another phrase that sounds like a mouthful, but I'm pretty sure you can break that down for us, Matt. What does that look like?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about security. You might have to do contiguous for me, but the I think data is obviously a huge thing, right? So I'm not sure how the audience is very familiar with like GDPR or some of the California privacy. I think Massachusetts, New York have a lot of these states are starting to pass these data privacy laws. And so really making sure that we're paying attention to all the data that we are gathering and that it's being stored securely, but also how we're starting to utilize that in our processes to make best decisions. But I think a lot of organizations, especially nonprofits, and I think as you said at the top, there's maybe some people think that, oh, nonprofits are so different than for-profit. They really aren't in a lot of sense. It's just I think the people you find there are a lot more altruistic and willing to help and trying to do things in the nonprofit space. But the actual operations can be very similar in some sense. I think a lot of people forget that. And so when it comes to data, like data is the new oil in the for-profit space. Like, are we doing that in the nonprofit space as well? Maybe not as well as we could be. And so that would be my part on that in terms of data, and the security behind that is important and how we pay attention to that. So I'll maybe let you define the
Yeah,
other half of that
and
equation, and then we can
I
talk more
love the
about it. Yeah.
compare and contrast across
Yeah.
sectors too, which I think is really important to flag, is that there are some really key differences between the sectors, but then there are also pieces that we all align around. And one of those is security piece that you've just pointed to, the fact that transformation includes digital most of the time. It's difficult to talk about any sort of operational or strategic initiative that doesn't include a digital component.
Yep.
The piece that I understand to be the contiguous is that right now, a lot of our systems are siloed, right? So a department picked a tool that was going to meet their needs, and that wasn't necessarily thought about in collaboration with how does the data flow across an organization. And so I think that, to me, feels like one of the biggest sticking points that the nonprofit sector needs to grapple with first is how do we get contiguous technology to have data streams that can flow through AI partnered next level digital transformation. Yes. Right. And I'll let you pull that apart. That was a lot of
words. No, that's I think a great way to articulate that. And I would say that is where you start drawing distinctions between the for-profit and the nonprofit space, that in a lot of for-profit areas, that's kind of already been set up. It has been for a while. I think what you see in a lot of nonprofits, I can think of at least 2 or 3 that we've worked with over the last couple of years where they are rather siloed in their functions. And let's maybe paint a facetious nonprofit here in some sense. It's save the whatever it is, the whales, the children,
I'm just
something.
Pause there, Matt, because we promised that they would be facetious nonprofits. But the other value that you bring to this discussion is of all the facetious tales that you can tell, there are grounding in the reality of what's happening in our sector. So I appreciate you like taking a step back and not naming names, but this is not, a single use or a single organization that's suffering. It's kind of rampant, and you have that way.
Yeah, and I can't disclose specific clients, but I can weave in some stories perhaps. So I think what you see is that with nonprofits in philanthropy, you find the most mission-driven people you're going to find, and we all tend to agree on it. So let's just pick whatever it is that we're trying to do. Basically, everyone's in agreement. Yes, that North Star, we're here to serve that. And once we move on from that, it is then saying, okay, we need to find some people who are interested in that. It can't just be Rachel and Matt. There needs to be a couple other people helping this ecosystem to drive it forward, right? So we start bringing on different team members, and they start doing different things. And really those different things fall into at least, on most things, 3 or 4 kind of buckets. So one is we need to get resources, whether that is financial resources or like, toothbrushes to pass out to different people, or, a shelter. There's different things of resources we need to gather. And that is kind of your development team in some sense, right? And that they're bringing in people on the outside to gather those resources. The second piece would then be the more kind of programmatic team, and that they are distributing those, using those as best as possible. Let's not, chop down all the trees. Let's regrow them at the same rate that we're chopping them down, or something like some sort of way that we can continuously use these resources, not just get the money in the door and get out the door. Let's think about it in an effective way. And then behind that is really let's call it the back end of, there's maybe technology and back end office and all the people that are helping make those two things happen. Because really this is very, very simplified, right? But nonprofits have some big mission they're trying to do. They get some resources to do that, and then they go do it. That's kind of the way we look at it. And I think that, historically, how people have gotten into this is they join a nonprofit, they work there for many years, or they kind of jump around a couple different other ones, but you end up getting these really strong silos between some of these different groups. And that we have kind of the back end office, we have the people out in the field actually doing the work, helping those in need. We have the team bringing in money, and right, maybe some of those are performing very well, some of them aren't. And there's lots of ways where it's okay, maybe there's donor restricted funds that can only help this one very niche thing, but in program, we don't have people that can help with that. Or we have, great program, but we have this back end office that has created all these rules and all these policies that are just really outdated at this point. And the systems they have aren't talking, right? So how do we share kind of the full life cycle through, which you would easily see if, quickly talk about a for-profit, like, today we all buy things on the internet. There's cookies tracking us, seeing where we're going. Like, they can predict when we're going to buy next. And they have in their, back end, they can connect from a lot of higher education institutions can do this. You visited their website to you graduated and your alumni. Like, that is scary, but also interesting in that they have that data and they can then connect that through their systems, right? And a lot of nonprofits aren't there yet. And so how do we help them do that to be more effective in really serving their mission? Because that's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah. And I think you're speaking, to the really basic level of what are the job descriptions, who's doing the moving, who's doing the measuring, and that we've kind of done that, in our own spaces successfully for a while now. But as we are dealing with massive amounts of data and algorithms that are informing the way we do our work, I sense that there needs to be a move towards collaboration. And so you've helped us kind of outline what the current body of work is ahead of us, right? We need to develop roadmaps. We need to be thinking about how do we unsilo these departments that emerged organically to do the work that they were supposed to do. How do we start to unsilo? How do we start to create those contiguous technologies that are going to help us move data through, the algorithms in ways that are going to help us support the mission?
It's a great question. And before answering that, I would also say it's human nature that we create these silos. Like we have our little tribes and pods, and that's our group within HR, within development or something. And so it's I don't want people to spend too much time stewing on like how did we become this? Like it's what you are right now. And not every nonprofit is like it, but a lot are, and like that's fine. And so that starts shifting into how do we break these down? Like, and change is hard. Everyone wants to change, but no one wants to be the one who actually changes, right? And so how do we drive that forward? And I think what we've seen be successful in the past is really going back to the basics of like, why are we here? What is the mission we are trying to do? We all agreed that we want to serve, cure cancer, help the children, like something like that. Spread the word of God on our side. Like there's being able to do those things, and everyone who works there believes in that. So start there. That's where we all have common ground. And so from my perspective, and I use this in personal life as well as work and clients, where I think there's really three key things. As long as you have the same goals, you have similar morals and values, and then you communicate, you can get that way. You can then start moving towards that direction. And so I think that the first two are almost always check boxes for nonprofits. So it really comes down to communication and starting
to restate, it's like mission.
Yep, mission.
Clear goals, and then aligned values. Are those the three?
So like mission and clear goals could kind of be maybe one, you could say, but we have mission goals, but then the second one is morals and values. So I'll use another bad example. Let's say we want to, become president or something, right? Like, okay, you can do that, but you can cheat, steal, and lie to become president at the same time, right? And so like we all have to agree on some ethical goals that how we're going to act along the way to this goal, right?
Yes.
And so with nonprofits, those two are usually synchronous. Everyone agrees with those. The third one is really then communicating. As you're working on a team, you need to communicate, hey, we're walking down this road towards our goal. Do we turn left or we turn right? And
I think where the mission is usually explicit, the values are not, right? Like what is the method we're going to use to get there? And I think that's where AI starts to muddy the waters, right? We have these black box algorithms and we're not necessarily sure, does that tool align with the values that we want to show up with? And so I think that's where, again, going back to the AI imperative, it's imperative that the social sector step up and start saying, these are the values, this is how we expect the algorithms to respond to our queries. And no, all homeless people don't look like X, Y, and Z, right? Like, so how do we start to navigate and make more explicit what those values are to be able to start informing the way we use the tools?
Another good question. So roundabout way answer your question, I think here is that I think a lot of the nonprofits have that core big North Star, but they don't have how do we do that day to day. They don't have how are we going to do that in the next 5 years, and that kind of strategic planning that you have of over the next 5 years, we're going to do this. And that means Rachel and Matt in your department, this is the 5 things I need you to focus on and the metrics I need you to look at and drive that forward. And oh, by the way, make sure you have your kind of processes documented because we want to put them in the system because we need to get better systems so we can get better data that's more contiguous so we can start using this AI because I'm not going to jump on my AI rabbit hole yet, but it's going to change the world like crazy, and most people don't understand that yet. So really the moment is now that we really need to start acting. And I think as nonprofits, we've gotten, I don't know if gotten away is the right word, but we've been able to kind of cruise along for the last, say 10, 15, 20 years. And yes, we have the internet and we're using a CRM and we have, these things, but is it really up to speed? And are you going to be able to keep up as AI really starts taking off here in the coming years?
And Matt, I would put you into the checkbox category of futurist because you are already getting a sense of and envisioning what the work world with AI could look like. And so without getting too deep into that, I want to underscore that the part of the importance of doing this conversation is to activate people, to get folks excited and ready to engage with AI. And so going back to your roadmap planning, department by department, what would be some of those first key recommendations? And for me, it's been play. like get in there, get curious. But
Yeah.
if you're creating a 5-year roadmap for where AI is going to be in 5 years, what would you suggest people start grappling with?
Yeah. I would start probably away from AI to begin with. And then I think it's really important just to make sure you're clear with whether it's bottom ups or tops down as a nonprofit, as the organization, where are we going? What is our North Star? And usually that's clear. But how are we going to do that in the next 5 years? What does that mean day to day? How does each department then interact with that? And make sure there's clear ways to, use SMART goals. We'll put links if people don't know what that is, but that you're measuring that you're actually moving in the right direction. And I think that would then be a huge jump for many nonprofits. But I do agree that you have to quickly start thinking about the shifting technologies that are happening. And I think there's a lot, it literally changes every day or every week in the AI space. If you're not keeping up, I'm happy to share some links, but there's going to be ChatGPT, everyone knows, and it's useful for, let's say, like writing marketing copy or certain things like that. It's also not very useful in certain senses, right? And so there's downs and pitfalls to it. But I do think that there's a lot of let's call them like secondary apps coming out. I think maybe the best way to describe it is, chess AI for like the game of chess came out, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago at this point now. Like it was already computer programmed and it can beat any human player in some sense, right? Or at least create a draw. AI is going to start developing those types of AIs where this is an AI that's really good at fundraising and marketing to your constituents, or this is an AI that's really good at looking for fraud within your program, or this is an AI that's really good at checking your accounting, or there's going to be these plug and play AIs that are going to start coming out, and making sure that you're ready to plug those into your systems as needed is going to be able to help nonprofits as those start coming to market.
And I know at Grant Thornton, you have the privilege of chatting with nonprofits and philanthropies. And I think one of the biggest challenges for the nonprofits is coming up with the resources to start to create these initiatives, just, build the tools that they need, as opposed to what we've been doing with technology is retrofitting what was built for the for-profit world.
Yes.
And so, Matt, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on, how do we get ready? How do we prepare for, and how do we advise on what we need?
I think advising is a great way to do it, right? If you can come to organizations and describe to them what it is you're looking for, they will build it. If there's a market, they will build it, right? So those are like larger companies. If you're giving them feedback of this is something I'd like to see, they will pay attention to that. I think a lot of people underestimate how much companies and nonprofits listen to their constituents. Like you think you fill out that form and no one looks at it, but people do, especially if you can get them on a call and talk with them.
That's so encouraging, because I would assume, I have relationships with some vendors in the tech space, but to really encourage folks to lean in and have those conversations. And again, your advisory services, you're doing a lot of this advising to a lot of different spaces. And if that's your best advisement, then I think we best heed.
I think that's not going to change night over day, right? They all have product roadmaps, which is going to take time. I would say if you want something more tactical, something I've personally found is get to know some engineers, some people actually know how to code and understand AI. Like in my experience, out of all different types of people I've worked with, engineers in general tend to be a bit more altruistic, I would say, than other ones. And I think maybe that's, historically, at least they've had very good salaries and had that optionality maybe than others haven't. But you find someone who's passionate, who knows how to code, who understands AI, who is interested in your cause, and see if you can tap them to help you, even at let's say a donation type rate type thing.
Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing in that word altruistic, because again, I think there are very different values between, the public sector, the private sector, and the social sector. And our values are, how do we get this done for the good of community, as opposed to how do we get this done for a return on ROI?
Yeah.
And so I think folks who are adept at navigating that space, in my experience, have been grants managers. I don't know, Matt, if you have any other folks that you've chatted with who you feel like, aside from engineers, have a really good lens on what are the tools and what is the process change. And in the grants management folks I've spoken to, they also echo what you're saying, and it's people and process first. Understand what's the skill set. You're a small, lean nonprofit. You can't throw this giant tool set and expect there to be success. And so in my experience, because grants managers in philanthropies in particular are being asked to manage, navigate, and hold the data for the organization, they're particularly adept. Like the engineers are able to be altruistic and work, both sides of that table. I think grants managers are also able to think strategically, operationally, and then they're sitting with the values of the organization and weaving all of that together.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends for every organization. I think grants managers is definitely a good example because they're fairly across the organization. Any role that's really touching across the organization, it could be someone in your C-suite, it could be someone kind of on the front lines, but finding that person within the organization or someone outside, if it needs to be, gets it and kind of help them continue to have those conversations of this kind of grassroots movement within the organization because it takes time to build that consensus.
And do you have any stories of successful consensus building around a technology initiative?
Yeah. So I think there's two ways to approach it, kind of like I was talking before. One is kind of this top down, we're going to do this, and the other is more of the bottoms up, we need this type thing. And it takes time. So if it's a top down thing where you've got a strong leader, someone who understands this and is willing to have the hard conversations, make the decisions, it can go a little bit faster than the bottoms up, and it can happen, but it still takes time. In my experience with clients, anywhere from 2 to 3 years is kind of the minimum time frame you need to really truly transform yourselves in a digital transformation. You can do it faster if you've got maybe a really good head start, but if you're kind of needing to do a lot, it's going to take at least 2 years. The bottoms up is a little bit harder in that you need to, at some point, get leadership support on these types of things. And I think what I found in my conversations, especially over the last couple of months, I think even ChatGPT and AI coming out has done this, where it's everyone knows they need to change. It's like when the internet came out, in the 90s and the .com bubble of like, we got to move. Like, I think it's kind of the same thing right now where there's definitely a lot of like just junk out there, but there's a lot of the overall cause is right. And that like AI is coming and it's going to be large. And so I think a lot of nonprofit leaders are starting to see it, but they need to know and understand do their teams actually want it. And so if you're someone who doesn't maybe have quite the authority to drive something, continue to talk with your manager, talk with your team about it, try to discuss like, hey, is there a better way that we could be operating? And is there technology we could be using to drive this transformation forward?
Yeah. And I think going back to driving the transformation forward, you and I have chatted about like different components that need to be in place in order to successfully transform. And one of those is support from senior leadership. The other is the willingness of staff to engage with change management. And that's a substantially large lift. I think we undervalue, the sitting in a seat for 30 years and doing things a particular way, and then coming in and saying, I think there might be a better way, and we need to explore that. That can create a lot of friction. And so if those are two key components, is looking at the people and helping them get ready, and then senior leadership and helping them see the longer term vision, what else as an advisor are you suggesting as folks are getting ready to transform either towards AI or just unsiloing? How do we begin to transform beyond those pieces that I just outlined?
Yeah, well, I would echo those two pieces because those are really important because it's think about it this way, right? If let's say it's a religious based organization in some sense, like this is literally one of the most fundamental important things to them, right? And you're kind of questioning the way they've been operating for a long time, right? Or if you are, let's say a social services organization, have you been not helping people the way you thought you were? Like you're the way when you start having these conversations, and maybe as an organization you agree, but there may be individuals who don't. Like it's going to be a personal attack in some sense, right? Especially because we're not Goldman Sachs. We're not out here stealing money, right? So it's like that. Disclaimer about Goldman Sachs. I'm not saying about Goldman Sachs. But either way, but the point is that like something, the dichotomy is different, and so that can touch people very personally, right? And so that is the challenge when you try to drive that change. And I think a lot of nonprofits underestimate that hurdle to get over. Even in for-profit, you run into that, but nonprofit, it's much, much more personal.
And I know in the fundraising universe, there's the time, treasure, talent, right? And I think with digital transformation, it's the same pieces that you need in place, right? The time to dedicate to exploring this, to understanding, like we're not saying that you've been doing it wrong for 30 years. We're just saying maybe there's a new approach. Time, treasure. Somebody needs to invest in the infrastructure to create the changes that we're aspiring to implement in order to better use our data, in order to better serve our communities. And then the talent, right? The imperative that we upskill these nonprofit employees who care so deeply, who are so passionate about doing good by their communities. And then we have this thing like, well, we got to transform because the world has changed.
Yeah.
So I wonder, Matt,
Well,
if
I
you
think,
have any, responses to that, but also a call to action as we're asking people to lean into these hard spaces.
I guess a couple comments. One is, I think thinking through and trying to understand, are you a nonprofit? Are you an organization that wants to change? Are you an organization that needs to change? And there's a certain handful of organizations out there that are resourced well enough and have adapted in the past that maybe want to change, and they're going to have maybe an easier time of that versus there are, nonprofits out there that we've, run into in our work where they're maybe not quite really wanting to change, but they need to change because they're not going to exist or things are going to it's going to snowball, right? And so I think that's really understanding what type of organization you are and using one of those two as a way to kind of help drive your, like, you know, trying to think of the right word, like, a kumbaya or come to Jesus moment. Those are not maybe the most politically correct ways of saying things, but like there needs to be like all hands on deck. We got to change here a little bit, right? And so using that as a catalyst while holding that North Star up and saying, we need to keep helping here. So to do that, we've got to fix down here. And that will sometimes work, but it's a long process, takes time.
And I think the other complication in the social sector in particular is that the technology skill set is not what we arrive with, right? We are not engineers. We are not data scientists. Yep. We're here because we care about a particular population. And so to be told we have to go through the digital transformation thing and adopt AI, like, of course, there's going to be pushback and a feeling of friction. Mm-hmm. But I think that is this moment of imperative, is that we can't dig our heels in. Otherwise, obsolescence is on the table. Otherwise, that community will no longer receive the services.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you can't be the ostrich putting your head in the sand. And I think also donors are getting more demanding, maybe is the right word, and that people want to see that, like, this is actually having the impact that you say it's going to have. And so being able to measure that and prove that, and whether that's donor restricted funds or not, like, people just want to be able to know, is this nonprofit doing what it says it is in the most effective manner, right? And maybe it is, but could we do it better, right? And that is where we need to have the data to prove that, yes, we're doing better, or no, we could be doing better. And that involves the technology. And
yes, the data that isn't manually manipulated 3 times before it's handed off in a report, right? So back to secure and contiguous, like our data is securely housed and we can pull it contiguously from the system without having to, write a Broadway musical to get it out.
Yes. There's plenty of that. And again, I think it's anything we can do to help organizations be honest with themselves internally is important to do that as well as externally. So
thank you, Matt. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I do like to finish on if there is a LinkedIn personality or something else that you're reading that is helping folks, stay abreast with you, in collaboration with you. I think that is something we're trying to do here, is build a community of AI learners and folks who want to continue this conversation and continue to transform the social sector.
Yeah, no, I'd say, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have conversations. I'll share with you, Rachel, a couple links of some older blog posts about AI. And I think a lot of people need to understand how radical the world is going to shift, and kind of already has, but we hit. So, the future's already here, just isn't evenly distributed, as that old quote. Like, there's some very good chances that, like, AI will radically change the world in terms of how we interact with each other and others in the coming years. And even now, like, I'm maybe out on a ledge here, but like 50% of the things you see on the internet are fake. Like, it very well could be now. Like, if you look at some of the text and speech and auto generation things happening now, like, you don't know what to trust. And, that's just in kind of the social media world. But then if you think about work, like, there's cyber attacks going up. There's, companies that their AI is just, they don't need all these employees anymore, right? We can do things differently. The coders, there's lots of things that are shifting. And as an organization, as an individual and nonprofit, space, you really need to understand this. Not a lot of people are scared of it, and they're like, I don't want to think about it. But you really should spend the time to at least have a let's say a cocktail or coffee conversationable ability with AI and kind of know what you're talking about. And that like it's an exponential curve, and it's going to come here faster than you think. The really strong AI, and if we are going to try to navigate that as a social sector, let's make sure we're paying attention to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say, as far as the coming together, I know Project Evident is doing work to bring folks together. Community Resource Exchange, based in New York, is bringing nonprofits together to figure out how do we do this AI thing. But I think to your point, it's really about getting in and starting to understand what this tool is so that we can speak to what we need it to do in order to, in my mind, mitigate what is already a digital divide.
Yeah,
And it's only going to get worse.
That's a great way to describe it, is there is a digital divide. It's going to keep growing, and those that don't are going to get left behind. So how do we make sure that our service, our nonprofit, is one of the ones that's going to keep moving forward?
Thank you so much for your time, Matt. We look forward to having you on future episodes with your wealth of knowledge and cases. But for now, signing off on the AI imperative, and we will share some links for additional reading.
Thank you, Rachel.